Hey there, welcome to Coding with Drew. I don't know if you've noticed so far, but I really dislike PowerPoint slideshows, and I'll try to avoid it at all cost. Also, I believe slideshows are going to be outdated as soon as I make them, so it's best to point you to solid documentation that's going to be maintained over time. So I'm pointing you to tutorialrepublic.com. Go to CSS3 here, and you can see all this documentation. Now, what I want to point you to is these basics. And I suggest that you read over these basics and get a good feel for it after this conversation. So all I'm going to do is introduce you to CSS. We've talked about it, but we haven't really dove in yet. I've taught you how to add classes for already constructed CSS, but we haven't learned how to make our own CSS. So that's what we're going to learn today. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It's maintained by the World Wide Web Consortium, and it's been around for a while. There are three ways to affix CSS to your HTML document. There's inline, embedded, and external. We do not care about these first two. We are only going to use external, as I've demonstrated in the past with Bootstrap. Let's down here so that you can understand external style sheets. Whenever we want to reference external style sheet in the head of our HTML document, we add an href link to our CSS document. And in our CSS document, we will use CSS notation. Well, what is CSS notation? Let's look. So here's the syntax. It's really simple. This is all you need to know for all of CSS. You'll have a selector, and beyond the selector, you'll have curly brackets, also known as mustaches. Inside the mustaches, you'll have a declaration, and that declaration will have a property and a value. And each property value declaration will be separated by a semicolon. You can have multiple properties. All you need to know about the order of these is that there is a hierarchy. So the first one that comes will be overwritten by the second one if they declare the same thing. Selectors are an interesting topic, and we're going to get into that next. Selectors are used to pin the properties that you've selected to your HTML document. This is a universal selector, and you've seen me use it in the past, but the universal selector will select all the HTML tags on this document, and it will affix whatever properties you apply. So this margin and padding. You never want to put this as the bottom of your CSS file. You want this to be the very first thing that appears on your CSS file. And this is common where people will use it to establish their font styles. It's better to be more specific and just use body and then specify your font classes, but this is applicable and correct as well. Now, the selectors, you can use your elements. So each one of these element tags, you can use an A to select or an image to select. The way you do it is just the selector and then mustaches and your declaration. You can also do IDs. So IDs are just annotated by a hashtag. So if I gave this one an ID of 1, I could then reference it in my CSS file as #1. There's also class selectors. So in the div section, we learned how to affix a class. And so you're already familiar with this. You would just fix a class to an HTML element, and then in your CSS file, you would refer to it by dot and then the name of the CSS class. You can also do an element with a class with a dot notation. And then there's descendant, child, and adjacent siblings. These selectors allow you to select tags based off of their relative position to another. So the first thing I'd like to dive into is descendant selectors. So in a UL class, anything that is a list item that is also an anchor tag will have text or declaration of none. You don't really need to know the properties just yet. I just want to talk about selectors. On this one, the H1, if it's emphasized, it'll be green, but not the H1 itself. And the child selectors, this is using a greater than sign to say the list item has to be nested inside of the unordered list. And for this one, it would have to be an ordered list inside of a list item that was inside of an unordered list. and you can do adjacent ones. So if there's an H1 and followed by a paragraph, you could do it with the plus sign. And then there's general sibling selectors. We don't really need to get into these, and group selectors. So with groups, you can select those instead of doing it like this, where you do H1 and then H2 and then H3, you can actually do it like this, where you have H1, comma, H2, comma, you just separate elements for anything that's combined, and then just do what's different on their individual ones. All right, so we've now learned a little bit about selectors. Let's learn about some of the properties. So color is probably the easiest property to look into. The color is a property that lives inside of the curly brackets, and there's three ways to use colors. Color can have a keyword, red, blue, green, or it can have a hex value. And hex values are red, green, blue formation. So there's some really cool documents. Let me open one for it. So here on Rapid Tables, there's a red, green, blue picker. And on here, we can specify these values. And what you can see is these are red, green, blue. And if I select any one of these colors, it'll give me the hex number or the red, green, blue value. And so let's say we go with yellow, right? It's 4 Fs and a 33. So if I wanted to utilize that, all I would have to do is do a hashtag Fs and a 33. Now, these are 2 digits, green 2 digits, and then blue 2 digits. Whereas, and these are hexadecimal, so they go from 1 through 9, and then A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Sorry, A, B, C, D, E, F. Whereas RGB values go 1 through 255, or 0 through 255. And they are annotated like this, where you would do RGB parentheses 255 for the red, 0 for the green value, and 0 for the blue value. The higher the number, the more saturation from that color you would get. So if you had 255 in the first one and 0, 0, this color is going to be red. If this was 255 and this one was 0, you would have green. If this one was the only one that was 255 and the other two were 0, you'd have blue. We'll see that more in the future. So now you know about colors, let's learn about backgrounds. So let's go to our background. So backgrounds, you can choose a color or you can add a picture, and you do that with background image. And you can also repeat that image. There's 4 ways to do it. Repeat does it across the entire document. You can do repeat X, which will repeat it across the document in the X direction, X being horizontal, or repeat it Y in the vertical on Y axis. And then no repeat will just put the image one time. You can also select the background position, right, top, center, etc. Now let's look at fonts. There are a couple different properties that you can choose from: font family, font style, font weight, font size, and font variant. So the first thing that you would end up doing in almost any document that you create is you're going to use something similar to this. And you can import fonts into your document by going to fonts.google.com, and you can select a font you like. Roboto is pretty common. And you can download the family, and then you can import it into your document. If you select the style, you can also just copy the link straight from Google and import it into your document. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's import that into this document here. And then we'll go to, we'll see it go live. Now we've imported it, but we haven't specified it anywhere. So the way we would do this is in our CSS file. And we'll get into that back on this document. So over here, you would specify your font family. And in Roboto, the way you would do it, let's dismiss this. You would do it just like this. It says CSS rules to apply to families. So you copy this and you'd go to your document and you'd add a reference to your CSS. So let's go ahead and do that. Link href is going to be /css/main.css. Now in our main.css file should be blank. We're going to type that in, and we're going to say body curly mustache. We're going to close it, curly mustache. Now if we go back to our document and look at it, the font has slightly changed. It's subtle. All right, so now we've learned our fonts. Let's learn about text. Text has a number of properties that you can select. Text align, which specifies where in the box the text is aligned to, left, right, center, just like on a document editor. You can do text decoration. Text decoration would do things like, let me find text decoration. So you can do an overline, a line through, or underline. These are solely format and actually have no visibility on a screen reader. This is why underlined is in your HTML is actually more powerful than with CSS. I'm not going to read off this entire document for you, but I would like for you to read through each one of these examples and get a better understanding for what each one of these does. So I want you to go through all these basics here and get a good understanding of these. And I'll see you in the next video where we talk about the box model.